Eyes on Longmont, offering a diversity of topics about our community that will inform and entertain you. We invite you to sit back and enjoy this edition of Eyes on Longmont.
This is the tale of a place that provides care for its community members in a unique way. It takes place in a lovely spot called Longmont, Colorado, which is based at the foot of the mountains. Because Longmont is special, it also has residents who are special. The people of Longmont need a place to go when they need care, when a baby is born into this life, when an accident happens, an illness must be treated, or just to maintain a healthy lifestyle. Longmont United Hospital is the place its community members go to be treated, to be cared for, and to be guided on the path of wellness. It takes a special and singular place to cultivate this kind of care, and gifted people to provide this type of service. This is the story of how Longmont United Hospital became a Planetree Hospital, and how the staff was able to provide the type of care for such a special community and its members. In the 90s, the hospital was too small to meet the needs of a growing community. A new facility was being planned for expansion and new medical procedures. It was important that the structure blend with the history and new technologies of the future. It was a very big venture and responsibility. It would empower patients and families through information and education while encouraging healing partnerships with caregivers. The leaders of the hospital wanted to combine the best of the past with the promise of caring and health for everyone coming through its doors. The Planetree philosophy was the vehicle to give definition to the practices already in place. They would include key components in the physical structure, as well as encompassing the entire embodiment of healing. Mind, body, and spirit must be equally important in the healing of every patient. This would include key components: human interaction, patient empowerment, information and education, the importance of family, friends, and social support networks, as well as spirituality, human touch, healing arts, complementary therapies, architectural design conducive to health and healing, nutritional and nurturing aspects of food.
Being in the hospital all these years, I'm one of the longest-termed nurses at the hospital. Not the longest, but one of the longest. This year is 33 years. And I was one of the first babies born at Longmont United Hospital when they started delivering around 1960. Planetree is so much about patient-centered care, but what I'm going to tell you is we had already started integrative medicine back in 1993. When the community sent me to China. Our leadership has been and still is a leadership that wants our hospital to really be the best at delivering patient-centered care. It's very exciting to be here today to talk about Planetree and how Longmont United Hospital embraced Planetree. So I would like to ask you both a few questions about how we got started. And I know it started at a conference in Vail back in the earlier days. And so could you talk a little bit about where we embraced this concept called Planetree?
Well, it's kind of interesting, I think. We were at a conference in Vail, as you said, a Colorado Hospital Association conference. And I remember distinctly walking down the street, and Mark Johnson, who was our architect at the time, caught me and said, "You got to go hear this guy speak." And he was one of these lecturers who was doing his program multiple times. So I picked a time and went to hear him, and he was talking about Planetree. And as I listened to him, I thought, wow, this is really neat. I had several thoughts at the time. One was that this is what we were trying to do, what we're doing. We were on this journey, and this guy was giving it a vocabulary, a language, that we could take home and use, I could clearly see. And the other thought I had was the person who told me I needed to go talk to him was our architect. And we were getting prepared to start a planning process for basically a whole new hospital. And so I thought, he gets it, and this is what we want to do, and off we went.
What were some of the principles of Planetree that really excited you two as leaders of our organization the most?
Well, I think one of the things that excited me was the opportunity to build a hospital that did not look like a hospital. That when people came in, there was a sense of relaxation with music playing and wonderful ambiance, the rooms done like you would be at home or in a hotel. We wanted to really be a wellness place, not an illness place. And so when people came in, I think they had more of a sense of relaxation instead of being as stressed as persons are when they come into the hospital. Don't you think that was one of the...
Very much. I think the Planetree idea that it's the patient's experience. All hospitals were trying to get into we care and all these different slogans, but it seems to me this took it much farther and made it very real. They were really trying to get inside the patient's head and figure out what it was where they were coming from, and then adapt ourselves to the patient's desires, needs, wishes, so forth.
And I think we went further than that, because the families are such a part of the experience. So what could we create that families would also come in and feel comfortable and have spaces where they could get out of the patient rooms and relax, dining areas where if they wanted to go have a meal with that patient in a private area. So we put a lot of thought into, of course, the patient, but the families were extremely important as we developed this whole process. We were also smart because we did focus groups. We brought community people in. What do you want? It's easy for us to say, this is what you want. But they actually came and gave us their dreams. One thing I would never have thought of is they wanted hair dryers in the patient rooms. We would have never thought of something like that. So they had a lot of input into what the final product was for them.
How did we incorporate staff in this? I know there were some visits to other hospitals. What are some of the things we did that brought the staff into this concept?
I think one of the major things we did, as I recall, was forming Longmont United Hospital University. And the thought was, okay, some of us have had the opportunity to literally go and see a Planetree hospital and see how it functioned. And so we decided that every employee in the hospital needed to go to the university and go through an extensive program. And I think it was 2.5, 3-day program that we put people through, which was quite a commitment.
And we also, when we were designing it, because this was a huge change for the nurses, we were taking them out of an area where they went down the whole corridor, they all worked all together, and we were putting it into pods where they would be separated. And there was lots of conversation about, you're going to put in curved walls, it'll never work. So we did mock-ups, and the nurses, physicians would go in there and see how that would work. Their input made a multitude of changes in the whole design, and also made them feel like they were part of what it was going to end up looking like. Extremely important to bring all these people to the table. So they had ownership.
So I would love to hear more now about some of the components that you saw us personalize at Longmont United Hospital, be it the floor, the clowns, the patient representatives. How do you feel like Longmont personalized Planetree at our facility?
Well, I think we could talk endlessly about the physical plant because we had a golden opportunity there. We're basically building a new hospital, and that was an opportunity many of the Planetree hospitals didn't have. But I think more than that, there were a lot of programs that we were initiating. You talk about the clowns, and clowns are a mixed bag. There are those people who think clowns are the funniest thing in the world, and those who are kind of uncomfortable with them. So you've got to be careful with that kind of thing. But you think about clowns walking through a hospital. Wow, an unbelievable type of experience for our patients. And for those who do enjoy clowns, I think of a patient who was actually terminal, who had a clown in his room with his family, and he was laughing, and that really created a long memory. For the family told me afterwards that that's their memory of their loved one. As the loved one was dying, they remember their loved one laughing. That's kind of a priceless kind of a thing. To things like putting a piano in the lobby, and there's many places that you can see where they'll have a piano and they'll say "Do not touch," which is really kind of unfortunate. Why have it? We had this idea we're going to put in the piano. We want anybody and everybody who wanted to sit down and play it. And we had some wonderful stories, and I'm sure those have continued to this day, from patients who went in and played the piano. And we had a patient, particularly comes to my mind, who was quite elderly and actually came to us out of a nursing home and needed hospital care. And she hadn't played a piano in years, and she asked, "Gee, could I play that?" Well, of course. And so she sat down and played the piano that she hadn't played in years. The lobby of the hospital lends itself. A number of the floors above the lobby are open. The waiting areas are open to the lobby, so it invites doing things in the lobby that people throughout the hospital could enjoy. Information. Just one more thought. The idea that the patient should be informed about what's going on in their care, and they can be more part of the care if they're understanding what's happening. And so we wanted the patient to be informed, so we created patient libraries on each floor.
Plus an opportunity for volunteers to have new and different experiences. Longmont Hospital is so fortunate to have about 600 volunteers who are truly committed to this hospital. And so it opened up chances for them to do something different. Not that the welcome desk and the traditional volunteer opportunities are not important, because they're extremely important. But this allowed us to branch out. Like now, the volunteers had a chance to become patient ambassadors. And that meant they could work on the patient floors, they could be extra hands for the nurses, answer the bells, give those patients a little extra loving care, but also to give those volunteers a whole new experience, because everybody knows when a volunteer goes wherever they go to work, they want to feel valued and valuable. So when you keep them busy and they really think they make a difference, then we brought on dogs, therapy dogs. They're called TAILS, Loving Therapy Animals in Loving Service. We have maybe about 35 or 40 teams now. They just make a big difference too. They go in and they see the patients, and I have some interesting experiences too about how a dog going into a patient room changed the experience for that patient by allowing them to get more relaxed, pet the dog. Because many patients, when they come in, they miss their dogs. Their animals are a huge part of their life. So we had lots of opportunities for those volunteers to get committed, and they love it. Love being there.
I think some simple little things, like hospitals always traditionally had visiting hours. And what's that about? You've got patients who have surgery early in the morning, you have patients who have surgery late in the afternoon. When they're ready to see people, it's totally different, from their experiences in the hospital. So why have visiting hours? Why not leave the patient and their loved ones more in control of that process? We think little things like that, make a big difference in the patient's experience. Food, traditionally, you have breakfast at a certain time. All the trays come up to the patients, and again, a patient might have just gotten out of surgery, and you're presenting them with food, and they're still under anesthesia. Well, several things go on there. One, they're not interested in eating. Two, you just prepared food for no real purpose. But the idea of having, why not have food when the patient's ready to eat, when they're hungry, and they want to eat. And if it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, fine. Again, it's kind of looking at things differently, looking at things from the patient's perspective.
I think how we incorporate a community is such a beautiful story at Longmont United Hospital, and I know it started long ago. Can you talk a little bit about how that worked, and our garden and all those other stories where the community participated in that?
Well, I think long before we were involved, when the hospital was first built in, I want to say 1959, somewhere along there, it was truly a community barn raising. I mean, the community decided they wanted the hospital, and a significant part of the money was raised through the community to have the hospital in the first place. And I think ever since then, the hospital has had a strong tie with the community, obviously in the care it provides, but also in a link in terms of the community supporting the hospital over and over again when there's been a need for it. An example of that would be, I remember some residents came to me and said, we have arthritis, and we think a warm water pool would be helpful for us and make us feel better, and we've decided that the hospital should be the place for it. And I'm going, oh? And thinking, in one way I'm thinking, okay, now we're going to have a pool we got to take care of, and how do you take care of a pool? I know nothing about this. And as the more I listened to them, it made a lot of sense. And Mabel Durning was the person who really was the key driver of it, but she had many other allies that I apologize for not naming them all. And they went out and said, yeah, we're going to raise the money. And I remember going to the hospital board and said, well, there's this community group that wants to have a pool, and they virtually picked the hospital as a place they think it ought to be. And the board kind of had a similar reaction that I had. Okay, this community's going to tell us what we need. Yeah, that's what's going on. Well, after digesting and getting over our own personal thing about we're in charge, we decided this was a good idea, and we supported her, and there was a third-degree pool that was built.
Well, that also precipitated in the design to put the gym right there by the pool, so that any community member who wanted to walk in and participate in the programs for the gym, it was very easy for them to come in if they were coming in because they had some issues. They didn't want to walk very far. We made sure it was designed so it was right there they could come in. That gym area is used by so many people, and it reinforces we want you to be well. And it's very well used. And then for those who want the pool, it's all right there. It's not up on the 3rd floor. It's not down in the basement. It's on the 1st floor, right inside the entrance, for your using pleasure. The other opportunity which was not on the drawing board, but the new addition, of course, had to connect to the older hospital. So there's a long corridor there, and it's a long corridor. So I had the opportunity, it just happened, to meet someone from the Longmont Council for the Arts. And we began to talk about this long corridor. And because Planetree really emphasizes art, we talked about the opportunity of community members who belong to the council displaying their art in this long corridor. It was fabulous. They brought their art in. It's totally filled with community artists. They come in every 90 days. They change the art out. The art is for sale. The hospital takes nothing from that. They get all the revenues. And I think the last time I checked, and it's been a while ago, they have sold like $325,000 worth of art out of that art walkway. That's one advantage. The second advantage was family members or patients who just wanted to walk could stroll down and look at all the art. And it just was a relaxing, wonderful opportunity for them, for the community, for the artists, for everybody. That was a huge win-win.
That came on the tail of bringing Patch Adams in.
Oh, Patch.
Remember when we brought Patch in and talk about maybe we did that grand kickoff. We also talk about the garden.
When we built the emergency department, between the emergency department and what was south, the rest of it, was this huge dirt area. And so one day I thought, we ought to be able to do something with this dirt area. And I talked to Mitch, because we weren't there then. And I said, Mitch, I think we ought to turn this into a garden. And he said, well, what do you have in mind? And this was, again, if I can raise the money, that was always the key. You go to an administrator and say, if I can raise the money, can we turn that into a garden? Well, if you can do it, let it happen. So I went to the volunteers, and I said, here's a concept. We could turn this dirt space into a wonderful area of relaxation. All we have to do is raise the money. Well, that was easy to do. We sold bricks, we sold the chairs. Then it came to the point, what else are we going to have? And I said, well, I want music out there. Well, you can't get music out there. I said, yeah, I think we can. So the designer, we worked with an architectural designer for landscaping, and today that garden, I was actually there the other day, there was a patient with his wife sitting out there. He said to me, this is so wonderful. I come out here every day with my wife, and it's just like a breathing space, because I'm listening to the music, and I'm looking at the surroundings, and he said, this has helped make me feel better. That's what it was about. It's a wonderful space.
Talk a little bit about how we brought the physicians on board. What did the physicians think about the concept of Planetree?
When we started talking about Planetree, the doctors started going, okay, how is this going to interfere with their practice? I mean, how is this going to interfere with their doctor-patient relationship? They had a lot of questions about how this was going to work. Is this one more fluff idea that the hospital has that's just going to spend money and all this sort of thing? So we brought in Mark Scott and his chief of staff from Dallas, Oregon, which is the hospital we first went to get our orientation of Planetree, and they came and they met with our whole medical staff, and they both did a wonderful presentation, and I could just feel it in the room, an acceptance. And beyond acceptance, it was like, this really has merit. This is something that really makes some sense. So I think their support of it, grew over time. I think there was skepticism. Is certainly I had skepticism. Everybody has their process they go through. But as it evolved, I think they saw how it could improve their relationship with their patient and literally improve patient care. And be very supportive of what they were trying to do, as physicians.
The chapel. We've had such an opportunity with that chapel. Can you talk a little bit about how that was made? And I think the stained glass was another story.
Unfortunately, we could not locate the chapel as close to the critical care areas as we wished, so we got it as close as we could. And again, that was a community involvement, because we were able to get some of the stuff in the chapel from old churches that were donated. The beautiful stained glass was designed and then purchased by the volunteers, those volunteers, and put in, and that chapel is used a lot.
I know one of the big challenges that we had, especially when you and I were working together, was the whole concept of we've got that initial amazing the build and all the really exciting things that happened, and how do we keep the momentum going and keep it from being the flavor of the month.
Right. That was probably my biggest fear with the whole philosophy. At that time, there were a lot of changes going on in healthcare, and most every hospital had their flavor of the month of how they were going to treat patients better. And I was afraid that Planetree would become just exactly that after a couple months it would be gone. And so the concern was that I believed the staff behaved with those principles most of the time, but they hadn't really looked through the characteristics of what does the patient see as they're being cared for. And so our theme was through the eyes, meaning through the eyes of the patients. Let's look at through the eyes of the patient and determine what they're seeing and what could we do to make their experience better. And so as we moved forward, I started to see behaviors that we'd had a dash of it over here and a dash of it over there, but then I saw it to becoming consistent, and I saw the staff, no matter what unit or department they were in, they realized that we were giving them permission to make the patient's experience better, whether it be they needed a magazine and they could run down and buy a magazine or get a magazine out of the gift shop, or maybe it was just that they had lost something and we tried to find it immediately. And all staff had permission to use that time to tell their supervisor they could get off of the unit and fix whatever it was that was disturbing the patient. And so it was really an exciting time to see those behaviors that had been there, but we'd now given them very much the permission to use those behaviors at any point so that the experience for the patient was better. And it's proved out in many, many ways.
That's what I loved seeing in the ICU. I know when people would come in new to the ICU, they would really talk about the fact that it was so unusual that it's normal here to go the extra mile, to get somebody a breakfast if they'd had a really stressful night, or like you said, to find something that was missing, or if they were of a different culture, to really look at how we could honor and recognize and accommodate that culture while they were going through the stress of being hospitalized. Right. And I love that.
Yeah. And then as time went on, I think we began to wonder, now how are we going to keep this enthusiasm up? And of course, every new employee was oriented to the program. But what I saw happen then, we decided we really did need to have those yearly, with Planetree calls, retreats, and a lot of people did that up in the fashion of taking the staff off-site for a weekend, etc. And instead we built mini retreats, which we could provide right here in our own facility and keep the cost very low. And so what we needed every year was kind of a little bolster with the philosophy, and so that began our journey through into the mini retreats. And after that, we decided that we really did need to become a designated hospital by the Planetree organization. And of course, that's where Carol Ann and I, and mostly Carol Ann, was good to have her and I teamed up, because Carol Ann saw that as a major challenge, and when you give her a challenge, she moves on it. And so what we saw happen was those principles of designation we started to figure out, now how are those already set within our organization, and if they're not, what are we going to do to make that happen?
Well, I think one of the things that I really love about this organization, and it started out with you and I partnering up, is the ability to do something like that. I had never been in an organization where I had seen so much direct support from administration, being willing to work with a staff member. I mean, I was just a nurse from the ICU, and you would look at the ideas and give them the credibility. It was wonderful that you would just support what was going on and let me know if things were realistic. And you could really feel that the upper level of the hospital supported what we were trying to do. And I love that, because sometimes when you're on a committee, the frustration is you come up with a great idea, but then when you try to bring it upstairs, it doesn't work because you haven't seen the big picture. So I think the wisdom of Longmont was really creating that kind of a partnership. That was pretty wonderful.
And we did make it through that first designation.
We did. It definitely was a challenge, because now I think there were 63 criteria. But there were quite a few criteria, and some of them didn't fit our personality entirely. So Sharon and I had to talk with Planetree on the phone, and I think one of the things, and it's something else I really love about Longmont, we were not willing to do something just to be designated. It had to fit who we are, and it had to fit the larger purpose and the vision of Longmont. And but Sharon and I had a lot of spirited discussions with Planetree about where we would and wouldn't go.
As we talk about designation, a little explanation there is that what had started to happen with the Planetree organization is they had decided that if you really wanted to tell other people about Planetree and have people visit your hospital, and we were doing this. We had many visitors come to the hospital, and groups of people from different hospitals, and we had a half-day session or a full-day session that they could come to, and we would talk about the journey that we had taken to get to what we felt a different culture, an accentuation of the culture maybe we had before. And so it became apparent that Planetree wanted only the hospitals that were designated to be doing that kind of thing. You can understand that because that certification identified us with certain standards, and they wanted to keep the standards very uniform throughout the hospitals that were calling themselves Planetree. And so that, to me, was the reason that we needed to go for that certification and continue to spread the word about the Planetree philosophy of treating the patient through their own eyes, and also of giving the staff the power to make changes and to be able to care for the patient as they would hope they could.
When we went to become designated, there were certain things that we didn't have in place. And I remember we went through the criteria, and we looked at ourselves, and we evaluated ourselves, and we sent that to Planetree. And we kind of had that back and forth for a while. And when they thought that we had done on paper what they wanted to see, they came to visit us, and they gave us a final evaluation. And I know there were a couple of things that we had to do in that final evaluation that we didn't expect to do. One of those was the ICU was one of, I think it was the only place in the hospital that was closed to visitation. We let you visit in certain small groups, and the nurses really controlled that. And when Planetree evaluated us, they came back and told us that we needed to have open visitation, and that didn't go over well in my my place. That was something that we really had to develop. But I think it showed our commitment to designation, that we were willing to do it. And I think the key for us is, instead of just making it open visitation, we made it patient-directed visitation. And this way we could take into account the acuity of the patient and what the patient needed to get well as we did that. I think the other interesting thing was the forming the Patient and Family Advisory Council, Wisdom Council. That was a challenge.
Yeah, we needed to find people in our community that would be willing to come and meet with us and give us feedback about how the community felt about what was going on here. And I believe we were a little reluctant to hear what they might have to say. As it turned out, it was mostly good things, but what they really did for us was, again, move us to, what does the patient feel while they're here? What are they experiencing? And are we doing everything that we can to make sure that that experience is a good experience, along with tempering the fact that they needed to have their rest and their treatments and all of their care that they needed to have. And so it helped them understand a little bit about why we might have some restrictions on things, but it helped us a lot to understand, again, what is a community really wanting in their hospital, in their community hospital.
We've really had the opportunity in the last few years to see Planetree become the heart of who we are at Longmont United Hospital, become a deeply woven part of how we do business and how we take care of our patients. And to see how the community's responded to that, it's been a really rewarding thing to watch happen and to be a real part of.
A few years ago when we started the journey, we wanted to be a Planetree affiliate and we wanted to be Planetree designated, but we wanted to retain our character as Longmont United, and we somehow have gotten to a place where we feel like we're strong with both, and that's a good place to be. And I think one of the things that I've really loved that I've been hearing from the Professional Nursing Council, I work with folks from the Evidence-Based Practice Subcommittee, and they're talking about how all of the research is really supporting Planetree and patient-centered care concepts, and it feels good because 15 years ago, or actually it's 16 now, we did it because Longmont felt it was the right thing to do, but there wasn't the literature out there saying this actually improves patient care.
It really helps patients heal better. It has the potential to shorten their stays, possibly engage them more in their health care so that they aren't readmitted as easily. There's all sorts of advantages to approaching the patient, from putting them at the center of care and really working with them to identify what do they need to heal effectively, not just what can we do for them with medicine and traditional things that everybody thinks of when you think of health care.
And that's actually huge now, because a big part of healthcare right now is what they're calling transitions of care, where we're trying to keep people out of the hospital. And the nice thing is it feels like we're a little ahead of the game, because this was engaging the patient and putting that as part of the equation has been part of who we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we start, when the patient first arrives at our organization, we try to get to know them well enough as an individual to understand what will help them become an active participant in their own care. How will they be able to manage their care when they're not at the hospital, not receiving the services that we have to offer and things like that. And we believe it makes a difference. Integrating all of the other therapies that we have available into the patient process, both in the hospital and then having it available for them afterwards at our Health Center of Integrated Therapies and some of those other areas sets us apart and also makes a difference for our patients, I think, every day. We see it in our what's called HCAP scores, and those are federal national benchmarks related to patient satisfaction. And we see that we are in the 90th percentile in most of those kinds of scores, because our patients feel well taken care of, feel like we care about who they are as an individual. One of the other nice things that I've seen evolve as we've become more and more Planetree and found it woven deeper and deeper into the fabric of who we are as Longmont United Hospital is how engaged we've become in the Planetree annual conferences. Planetree is an international organization, and people come from all over the world every year to go to the Planetree conference, as it's called. And they do a wonderful job of engaging people in what does patient care really mean, patient-centered care in particular really mean. And we have increased our role in that conference more and more every year, because people recognize in the Planetree organization how much we have figured it out. At our last survey, our redesignation survey, where we had to meet all the standards again and show them that we were doing it, the final statement of the people who surveyed us was, this organization isn't learning how to be Planetree, or isn't making the cake of Planetree, they're putting the icing on the cake. And our volunteers help us in so many ways with how we do Planetree. They take tea carts around, they take entertainment, we have hospital clowns, they do therapy animals for us. We couldn't do everything that we do without our volunteers as well. And one of the perks we offer our volunteers and our employees is our Health Ambitions Gym, and it's another piece of who we are at Longmont United that connects us to the community. It's a health club. It's on the hospital grounds in the hospital, so folks who have medical issues feel more comfortable coming back to exercise there. So we help promote wellness and their engagement in their care. And one of the really fun things to see that happens from it is the camaraderie that develops between those customers, whatever they are by the time they're no longer our official patients, but they're still coming back to see us. It's another way that we meet all the needs of our patients, and we also meet the needs of our community and really focus on putting the person at the center of the care that we deliver, and to really embrace what's important to them while we help them achieve better health and recover from illness, take themselves further than they may think they could even go in terms of becoming healthier and more engaged in their own health care.
That has been a great part about being a nurse here, is it's not just about the things that we can do, the medical processes, but this hospital is just really devoted to improving the health of our community. It's part of our mission, but it really is. It's part of who we are, and I think Planetree, again, in the very beginning, we adopted it because we recognized it was akin to our philosophy, but it just made the intrinsic goodness of this hospital shine through. That's why it's very easy being the Longmont Planetree coordinator.
Right. I think it does, and it comes from the top. I have to say, in my leadership role, I report to the board periodically about Planetree and what we're doing. And our board is all community volunteers. Most of them are long-term community members who are very committed, and they love hearing what we're doing, and they so support what we do, and they understand how much value it brings to the patients, to the community, and everything else. And that all comes together to make us who we are, and we all value that a lot. Caroline, I think one of the things that has been really exciting about the Planetree journey at Longmont United Hospital is that we started off as a community hospital in 1959, supported by our community. They fundraised so that the hospital was built with no debt, and we've been a part of it. We've been integral to the success of this community for a long time. That's why we're valued so much, I believe, by our volunteers, our board members, and everyone else who comes here. But Planetree was a vehicle that helped us just take what was innate to this organization to a much higher level than we probably ever could have imagined.
I continue to hope that in some ways Planetree will stay ahead of where maybe the rest of healthcare is in terms of how to engage and incorporate that patient and bring healthcare to a different level that way. And I'm hoping that that's where it takes us.
Yeah.
We became so good at really embracing the components of Planetree that we became a designated Planetree hospital, which means we're a mentor hospital. We were redesignated in 2013. And that is not an easy process. And we always have to show how we're evolving, how we're changing. And I think we're really well set up for the future.